day.
I need to.
Yeah. Looks like a gymnasium.
It does.
Yeah.
Big
Big
room.
room.
Looks like there are some others waiting to join, but I don't think we can admit them into the call. So there's more of us that are attending remotely than I thought there would be.
Hi, Pepper. This is Joan. Can you hear me?
I can. I'll be quiet now.
Oh, no, you're just fine. I'm admitting folks as I see them
Oh, good.
come to the lobby. So we'll take
Good.
care of that.
So John and I have no action items. All right. Thank you.
I'll take care of it all.
Now it's staying on. Okay.
Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I would like to ask Judd to call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike Alley,
I am present.
Dennis Bland,
Present.
Ann Bowen, John Costas,
Present.
Trent Engbers.
Present.
I'm present. Al Hubbard,
Here.
Chris Lamoth,
Here, sir.
Pepper Mulheron,
Here, sir.
Chris Murphy,
Here.
Dan Peterson, Bev Pitts, John Pop.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I am delighted to welcome you all back to our first campus visit in a year. It's great to be together. We've enjoyed the visit to the campus so much. I'd like to invite the Chancellor of IU South Bend, Dr. Susan Elrod, for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Chair Pitts. Nice to see all of the commission members again. So welcome to Indiana University South Bend. It is my honor to serve as the 6th Chancellor of IU South Bend. I started my term in June 2019, and while I knew the job would present me with challenges, a global pandemic hadn't quite crossed my mind. But that's another story. I'm honored to be here this afternoon to welcome you, members of the Commission, Commission and Government Relations staff, legislators, leaders in higher education from across the state, and other guests to this meeting of the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. I want to thank all of the IU South Bend staff, students, and faculty that have made this visit such a great success. They've helped with the arrangements, of course, the tour, were present at the reception and dinner last night, and of course, continuing to help facilitate today's meeting. As a regional campus of Indiana University, IU South Bend students earn an IU degree right here where they live and work in a small campus environment where they learn from distinguished professors and all at an affordable price. IU South Bend plays a vital role in our community by providing access to educational and engagement opportunities to all we serve, from grandmothers and grandsons. We just had a pair like that graduate together last month. Full-time or part-time students, those seeking college credit in high school, or those seeking undergraduate or master's degrees straight through or after some time off. Everything we do here is focused on lifting up the people, communities, organizations, and businesses in our region. That is a gratifying mission, and I see it every time I go out and about in the community. I literally cannot go anywhere without running into a current student, an alum, an employer, or someone who knows someone who has gone or is going here. The influence and impact of IU South Bend is deeply ingrained in this community. This is also reflected in the diversity of our student body. We're proud to be designated a minority serving institution with nearly 30% of our students coming from diverse ethnic and cultural backgrounds. And we're also designated as an emerging Hispanic serving institution with just over 14% identifying as Latinx. We're excited that we will reach full HSI status in the coming years. IU's new test optional policy is also opening doors of access to many for whom this requirement was a barrier. We also enroll the largest number of 21st century scholars in our region. Another way we're not only providing access, but improving social mobility across Michiana. To this end, we're proud to have been ranked in the top 50 of US News and World Report's rankings for social mobility amongst public comprehensive universities in the Midwest. A hallmark of our community is the relationships that our students have with faculty and staff. They can join research projects, work with community-based learning opportunities, become part of our growing honors program, or study abroad or participate in an internship. We also have 12 intercollegiate sports, and we have over 150 student athletes who play in this beautiful facility and, of course, facilities around our region. Our athletes are outstanding students as well. They are retained at higher rates and outstanding competitors. I've mentioned to several here that we're proud of our men's basketball team for clinching the conference championship for the second year in a row, despite setbacks presented to them by COVID. You are here meeting on our main campus, which is located along the beautiful banks of the St. Joseph River, where we have student housing for just about 400. And these environments are great ways for students to engage not only in the campus, but the community. We're one of 2 regional campuses of IU that has residence halls, and they play a critical role in recruiting and retaining, in particular, traditional aged students. We also have a location across town where we have our Civil Rights Heritage Center and a center in downtown Elkhart, which has most recently launched 2 new master's degree programs in the health sciences. I have said more about the campus and I'm always happy to say more. I am passionate about this campus. It's wonderful and talented faculty and staff, amazing and tenacious students, and of course, I could say more, but you all have a meeting to get to. So I will close by saying that it has been our pleasure to host you for this meeting. My pleasure to welcome you here. I hope you enjoy the meeting and continue to enjoy your time on campus. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chancellor Elrod, and thanks to you and your staff for hosting us. We have really enjoyed being on the IU South Bend campus. It's a delightful, beautiful campus.
Madam Chairman, could I just make a quick statement?
Please.
I want to tell you as a local community member, we are very pleased to have the Chancellor here. Susan has done a great job coming into the community, and in spite of COVID, has been involved in lots of things that are going on here and a lot of good things. So we couldn't be more pleased with her leadership here and her coming to the community.
Great tribute from a great community leader, so that's very nice. Thank you. Well, I must report that we have 2 key members of our board departing this month. Our longtime member of the commission, John Costas, has indicated he will not be seeking reappointment for his term that concludes at the end of this month. And as you know, Trent Engber, his term as a faculty member concludes at the end of June. John and Trent have been tremendous contributors to the commission, and we will certainly miss their insight as our faculty voice and as our first district representative. We have resolutions honoring them for their service, and I'm going to ask Chris Murphy if he could please read the resolution for John Costas.
I am honored, pleased, proud, and a bit sad this resolution. I must say I have had the honor of working with John for 16 years here and struggling through the first Reaching Higher document and watching this commission change dramatically over the years to where it is much stronger, much more focused, much more disciplined today than it was when we both first started here. And John has been a great partner for the commission and for all of us in what he's done here. And so I'm pleased to read, but sad to read the following resolution. Whereas John Costas served with distinction on the Indiana Commission for Higher Education since his initial appointment in July of 2005 and reappointment in July 2013 to represent the 1st Congressional District, and where he has helped shape the Commission's strategic vision as expressed in the Commission's evolving strategic plans since the release of Reaching Higher in 2008. And whereas John's exceptional leadership skills were recognized by other commission members by serving in multiple roles on the executive committee before being elected chair in 2008. And whereas he has been a dedicated member of the Budget and Productivity Committee since that committee was created in 2011. And whereas John played a key role in the development of 7 biennial budget recommendations, most recently during crucial discussions of outcome-based funding as part of the Commission's 2021 to 2023 biennium. And where his passion for the Commission's work was reflected in his advocacy for higher education in his public service career, including as mayor of Valparaiso. And whereas John has always approached challenges facing higher education from a statewide perspective, with attention to how Indiana's system of higher education served the needs of students, And now therefore be it resolved that the Indiana Commission for Higher Education expresses its deep appreciation to John Costas for 14 years of service to the state on behalf of Indiana higher education and wishes him well as he continues to use his many talents to make life better for others and our state stronger. I move that motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion is approved.
Thank you. It's certainly been my joy and my privilege to serve on this commission. I have just enjoyed so much working with the other commission members. So proud of the staff here and we'll certainly miss the service. I suspect my greatest contribution as a commissioner was to recruit Teresa Lubbers in 2008. And I could say that was a brainstorm that I had, but in reality, I had quite a bit of direction from the governor at that point who said, go out and get this done. And fortunately, Teresa, you agreed. And I must say, I'm really immensely proud of our state government. I mean, it works. And we provide excellent service to our students, to our residents in a fiscally responsible manner. And that takes a lot of men and women who give of their time so generously to, like the people sitting around this table, to make that happen. And I'm very proud of our institutions who have adapted to the changing needs of our students. And I think this commission is very, very effective because a coordinating body means we work together and we let our ideas create a stronger partnership between the institutions, between the state. And so it serves a very important purpose. And so I've just been privileged to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for your service. You will be missed. As the chair of the Academic Affairs and Quality Committee, I have the privilege of reading the resolution for Dr. Trent Engbers. Whereas Dr. Trent Engbers served with distinction on the Indiana Commission for Higher Education since his appointment on July 2009 as the faculty representative, and whereas he has a conscientious and faithful member of the Academic Affairs and Quality Committee, as well as an active participant in the Student Success and Completion Committee, and whereas Trent is actively involved with the development of the 2021-2023 biennial budget and legislative recommendations, and whereas his unwavering commitment to student success and timely completion was clear in all aspects of his membership on the commission, and whereas Trent successfully planned and hosted a well-attended and well-received faculty leadership conference in February 2021, focused on best practices and policy innovations for adult education in Indiana. And whereas he made the significant contributions to the development of the Commission's fourth strategic plan, Reaching Higher in a State of Change. And whereas Trent fulfilled his duties while impartially advocating for the students and faculty at Indiana's public institutions of higher education. Now therefore be it resolved that the Commission for Higher Education expresses its deep appreciation to Dr. Trent Engbers for his 2 years of dedicated service as the faculty representative to the Commission for Higher Education and to the state of Indiana, and wishes him well as he continues his teaching and administrative duties as Associate Professor and the Director of the Master of Public Administration program for the Department of Political Science and Public Administration at the University of Southern Indiana. I will accept a motion.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Thank you, Trent.
Well, I would less eloquently echo all that John said. I mean, certainly the staff at the commission and my fellow commissioners are outstanding in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. One of the things that people said to me when I started 2 years ago is it's just a good group of people. And that's certainly been reflected in my experience. A good group of people that works together, but also a good group of people who are dedicated to quality higher education for Indiana. And so I've certainly learned a lot. I hope I have contributed, and I look forward to hopefully being involved in other ways in the future.
And Trent, I will say again, as the chair of the Academic Affairs Committee, what your contribution has meant in terms of the curriculum and the academics of our state. A faculty member brings insight that no one else can, and you have contributed in so many ways at every meeting and is greatly appreciated. You will be missed. And I'd like to ask if there are other people who'd like to comment. About either, both John and Trent.
I would just mention that this is the hardest part for me of serving on the commission, is saying goodbye to our faculty representative every 2 years is difficult because they add so much. And I have no words for John's stepping off other than I'm upset with you. And outside of that, no, a deep appreciation for your many years and your fingerprints on so many things that had to do with higher education, John. Is just remarkable.
Trent, the thing you missed was John's guitar and his performances. So unfortunately with COVID, you didn't get the better part of this, and that's some of the socializing we get. And we've done a lot of kumbayas with John over the years.
Well, for what it's worth, I am in the market for a new guitar, and he was giving me some advice right before this meeting. So that was
So
the
we
reason
can get
for
a
the delay.
duet, could maybe bring you both back later on, huh?
I don't know if I'm up to his caliber, but I'd be happy to try and keep up.
Well, needless to say, we will be missing you every day, and we look forward to times when we will connect again. I did want to mention that the positions, as well as our 4th district position, the faculty position have yet to be appointed and by the governor's office, but we will keep an update on those 2 positions. And before I turn it over to Teresa, I just wanted to take a moment myself to thank specifically the staff and certainly all the commissioners as well, but for getting us through a very tough year. It wasn't easy to be online. It worked very well, but behind the scenes was a tremendous amount of work. Liz specifically, I want to give a shout out to, and all the staff who worked so hard to make it work. Big round of applause. And a personal thank you from me. And now I'd like to turn it over. Oh, am I? Yeah, I can't ever remember. I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Lubbers for her report.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm going to have my report today be a little different because it's going to be all about people. I promise I'm not going to talk about programs or policies or funding because there are a lot of people I'd like to talk about instead. And I want to really begin by joining the rest of you in recognizing the service of our 2 departing commission members. It's clear that the service that's provided by our faculty member is always important to the quality of our work, bringing that faculty voice to our work and reminding us of why we do what we do because they are there on that campus level. But I think it's safe to say that no one has done this job better than Trent. From day one, your perspective has enriched our discussions with thoughtful questions and an uncompromising commitment to the students we serve. So we hope, and Trent and I have talked about this, that we're really hoping to keep him engaged in our work in the months ahead. And he said he's willing to do that. So I think that's good news. Like Chris Lamoth or Chris Murphy, I hardly know how to adequately say thanks to John Costas for his many years of service to CHE. You know, you've been the best kind of a board member, which of course all of you are too, but you've made us better through your insights and you've always had our back. And that's great. You ask good questions, but we know you always have our back. And as you mentioned, when I interviewed for this job, John was the chair. And he talked to me several times on the phone. And I know that your counsel throughout my deliberations made my decision much easier. So thank you. It's never been a decision that I questioned. So on a personal level, thank you. You know, as has been mentioned a couple times, John's a man of multiple talents. He's been an impactful government leader, a visionary businessman, a talented musician, a dedicated community leader, and the heart of a very strong family. He's respected by all, and it is with more than a little regret for the closing of this chapter that we express our profound gratitude, and I do as well. So thank you. Now I wanted to recognize 2 other exemplary higher education leaders who are moving into new chapters. The first is President Michael McRobbie, who is concluding his final days as the 18th president of IU after 14 years in that role and nearly 25 years at IU. beginning his service first as the Vice President for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer. He served as Vice President for Research and Interim Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs. President McRobbie, I think many people have used this expression, but I think it's correct, has been a transformational leader. And at the commission, we've been privileged to partner with him in supporting many of the academic changes that have occurred at IU, including the establishment of 10 new schools within the university. He led a bicentennial strategic plan that's prepared IU for an even stronger future. And all of us, students, alums, policymakers, and employers, are grateful to President McRobbie for his service and wish him the best in the future. I know we have some IU folks in the audience, and I hope you'll share our thoughts with him as well as he's beginning to depart. I know Mary Jane is here as well from Ivy Tech, and I also wanted to point out with what a great pleasure it has been to work alongside Dr. Kathy Lee in her service to Ivy Tech Community College as she concludes a 37-year career with the college. She became the Chancellor of Ivy Tech Community College Indianapolis in 2012 after serving in many roles before that. The Director of Clinical Education for the Respiratory Care Program, the Dean for Health Sciences and Public Service Programs, and Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs. She has led Ivy Tech with vision for making the college stronger and passion for serving the students better. Ivy Tech and thousands of students are better because of Kathy Lee's service. She has an unflappable way about her in the face of challenge. She's always gracious in the way she serves and has been a true partner to the commission throughout decades of changing leadership and priorities. The bottom line is that she always puts the students first, and it is with great respect for Chancellor Lee's service that we express our gratitude, affection, and best wishes. Finally, I wanted to just point out that for the past 19 years and at nearly every commission meeting, we've been privileged to have Susan Brock-Williams with us from Purdue University. And Purdue has been fortunate to be represented by such a passionate advocate for the university and the students. Like the others we've talked about today, she's closing this chapter in her current role at Purdue. This is her last meeting with us. So on behalf of the commission members and staff, I want to acknowledge your service, Susan, and your professionalism, along with your friendship. So keep us in your circle as you move forward. And then, as you know, at each of these meetings this year, I've been recognizing something about the 50th anniversary of the commission. And today we honor the service of Dr. George Weathersby, who became the Indiana Commissioner of Higher Education in 1977. It so happens that our Associate Commissioner, Ken Sauer, served along with him, and I've asked Ken to share just a few brief remarks about the third Commissioner of Higher Education.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. And as Teresa mentioned, George came here as commissioner in 1977, was in office for 6 years, left in 1983. So that was the end of Governor Bowen's administration and the beginning of Governor Orr's administration. George had stellar academic credentials, faculty and administrative appointments at Harvard and UC Berkeley, very much into decision theory, quantitative modeling, planning. And in that connection, he got involved in some of the work that was going on at NCHEMS, the National Center for Higher Education Management System. And that kind of connection with NCHEMS did have an impact on staffing here. When George became commissioner, he asked Wayne Kirschling, who headed the research and analysis unit at NCHEMS, to come here as deputy commissioner. After that, Kent Weldon, who was also in Wayne's unit at NCHEMS, came here and joined the staff, and many of you here had the privilege of knowing Kent. And then finally, a third member of that staff, myself, wound up coming here as well. So we sort of recreated, at least in part, the research and analysis unit at NCHEM. So anyway, George was, although I didn't know him that well, he was really, he was a first-rate person to work with, and he had a really positive impact on the commission, and it's the professionalism of the staff that I think has continued to the present day.
Thank you, Teresa. That was really nice to hear those tributes to some great leaders in higher education over the years, and also the people around us this year. They're in change situations. It's always good to recognize the people that make the difference. So please have you do that. And now we're ready, I think, to move to business. So I'll ask you to take a look at the minutes of our last meeting, and I'll accept a motion for approval.
Move.
Second? I don't know if we need a second, but I'm glad we got one. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, on to business. The commission produces the college completion report every year. It analyzes college completion rates for Hoosier students. The report will be released in the coming weeks, and Sean is here, of course, to give us a preview of the report. So Sean, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Pitts, members of the commission. So each year we put out a series of reports. A little bit ago, I shared with you some of the results along with Charlie Bezor of the readiness report, and that's who graduates our high schools and goes on to college. How do they do that first year? This report kind of looks at the opposite end of the pipeline. How many of our students graduate? So we look at a few different metrics. The first two are really how many graduate on time. And for that, that's if you're seeking a bachelor's degree, did you complete within 4 years? And then if you are seeking an associate's degree or what we call a long-term certificate, did you complete within 2 years? But we also look at, are you on track to graduate at all? And for that, we look at a 6-year measure. So did you manage to complete within 6 years, either the degree that you started out going for or some sort of different degree? For example, this happens a lot for students who may transfer between institutions. They may change what it is that they are pursuing. And we want to make sure that we count and recognize that even if students don't complete on time, if they're still completing, that is both getting the state towards their goal, towards our goal, and helping students as well in their careers. Finally, we also want to measure ourselves against ourselves. So are the rates going up or down? This can tell us a lot about how the state and our institutions are doing. Why do we do this? Well, we need to be able to set some sort of benchmarks for both ourselves and our institutions. Education is a necessity, but the time and resources that it takes to complete, they can sometimes be luxuries. So we want to make sure that students are receiving the resources that they need in order to complete, as well as we want to make sure that we, and I use a broad definition of we, including both the commission and the institutions and community supports, parents, family members, communities. How are we doing in helping students complete? We also want to look at different gaps between who's completing and who's not completing. Also known as achievement gaps, equity gaps. We want to make sure that everyone has a fair shake. And finally, these graduation rates, they help tell a story about what we can expect for the state's economy in the decades ahead. So how do we put this together? Well, through the enormous help of the institutions themselves. Each year they produce reams and reams of data and then they send to us. That's where the commission comes into play, trying to put this all together. It takes a lot of time and effort, and I want to especially recognize Allison Partee and Alex Parkinson, who've been heavily involved in putting together these pieces. We also then ping this against the National Student Clearinghouse, which helps us kind of capture those students who have transferred here, there, everywhere, especially those students who have gone out of state, because a lot of those students end up coming back or vice versa. We also focus on first-time, full-time students. That's something that if we had an ideal world and an ideal data system, we'd want to be able to follow everybody and tell everybody's story. But we do know at the end of the day that students who are starting first time and starting full time, that's the best way to measure, our institutions helping them complete on time. And so we want to be able to kind of narrow that a little bit. We do, however, look in some key ways at students who start part-time. Those students starting out part-time, they know and they expect not to complete within 4 years for a bachelor's or 2 years for an associate's or certificate. But again, if we can get them across that finish line within 6 years, we count that as a win. This report that's going to be coming out focuses on students who graduated in spring and a little bit of summer of 2020. That means that for those who were seeking a bachelor's degrees, if they completed on time, they would have started in that fall of 2016 semester. And if students were pursuing an associate's or long-term certificate, they would have started in fall 2018. If you are looking at the 6-year rate, that extended time rate, it's for students who started at fall 2014, either at a 2-year or 4-year institution. This is important to note because these are 2020 graduates. As you may all recall, something happened in spring of 2020. And so one of the big questions that we had as we were putting together these data points over the last few months was, what was the story? What happened? And how would we even know it? And I want to especially recognize a lot of the institutions for working with us, essentially from May 2020, even in some cases, April 2020, throughout this entire process to make sure that the data came in smoothly and that we were able to figure out what was going on. Quite frankly, nothing would have surprised us if we had seen that completion rates had gone up, if we had seen completion rates had gone down, simply because this was an extraordinary time, a very unprecedented time, and we weren't sure both what things were going on in reality, as well as how those things would be captured in data sets. And those data sets had been built with kind of regularity and standardization in mind. So I won't bury the lead. The happy news is that the pandemic at least does not appear to have affected the students who were graduating in that spring and summer of 2020. When we look back, to us, at least that somewhat makes sense. In most cases, those students were weeks away from completing their courses. And so that's, I think, a happy story, but of course, that means that we will want to redouble our effort and continue to focus on the students who had not completed by 2020 and making sure that they were not adversely affected by the pandemic, since they will have spent more time of their education in the pandemic. So of course, now we want to know, how are our institutions doing? And so I'll start with the extended time rates. That's, again, students who went and graduated within 6 years. And so this is statewide average. This is 4 years, 2 years, the whole shebang. We've seen progress throughout the last several years. And in fact, close to 2/3, 63.6% of all students who start off seeking either a bachelor's, an associate's, or a long-term certificate complete within 6 years. When we break it out by the 4-year sector and the 2-year sector, for the 4-year sector, 71.7% of students who started off seeking a bachelor's complete within 6 years. And then for the 2-year sector, a little over 37% complete within 6 years. I'm going to take a moment here to compare to the national trends. If the numbers look a little bit small, I'll try to just kind of point some out. The National Student Clearinghouse has been doing enormous efforts over the last year during COVID to help us understand what was going on around the nation. And again, I really want to thank the institutions and even other states to work with us in trying to piece together a lot of the puzzles. We were all kind of stumbling in the dark together. And so these numbers come from the National Student Clearinghouse. These are 6-year rates broken out by different institution levels. That green line is overall 4 years, 2 years, publics, privates, all combined. That kind of red burgundy one is public 4 years. That orange one is public 2 years. And so if it's difficult to read, basically students who started in fall of 2014, which are the students that we're looking at, for the publics, nationwide, it's about 67.4%. That's a little bit lower than what I just showed for the Indiana institutions. We're at 71%. And then for the orange, the public 2 years nationwide, they're right around 40%. That's slightly higher than Indiana 2-year institutions. All things being equal, though, I think it tells a pretty good story in terms of Indiana. These numbers are not quite comparable. There's always a little bit of wiggle room here and there, but generally, Indiana institutions have been improving faster than their national counterparts. You can especially see it when you compare Indiana 2-year institutions to the national public 2-year institutions. Here, looking at it, the national 2-year institutions have barely budged, maybe 3 or 4 percentage point increase over the last decade or so. And so we've seen much more improvement with Ivy Tech and Vincennes. And so this is something that we'll continue to try to compare ourselves to. And many thanks to the National Student Clearinghouse.
Sean, could I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
When you look at these rates, certainly for the state, much less for the nation, do we have, is there any impact in these percentages by virtue of the number of students dropping who are coming into school? So that in fact, people who used to come into school because they just thought that's what they wanted to do, and now we put higher criteria, or we're now directing people to one type of institution versus another. I mean, are these numbers looking better because of the numbers, or because actually we're improving against those numbers?
The short answer is probably both in some ways. And a lot of it comes to bear when you look at, if you can see on this one, the students who started in 2009, you can kind of see that that's where basically across the board there was a dip. That a lot of that is because a lot of students entered college in 2009 due to the recession. And many of those students, as the recession got better, didn't end up completing. So you can kind of see the completion rates for that 2009 starters. That's a lot lower than typical. And so I think we can definitively say that thanks to the efforts of the institutions here, to community partners, to financial aid, we have seen significant improvements in the students who are served, but as well as in some ways, as we've seen fewer students go to college, that's also kind of shaken out a little bit of the impact as well. Now I'm going to turn to on-time completion rates for the 4-year institutions. Again, this is students who start off seeking a bachelor's and did they complete that bachelor's in 4 years. We are now at 50%, meaning that half of students who start full-time going for a bachelor's will earn that bachelor's 4 springs from now. While that might not seem the best number, it's a significant improvement, and we continue to improve over these last few years. Many folks who don't spend all of their waking hours with higher education sometimes are surprised to learn that we might be only around 50%, but in fact, it's a significant undertaking and significant improvement. In fact,
I think that's really worth noting, because people who've served on this commission for a long time and who have supported the efforts of either outcomes-based funding or the changes we've made for credit requirements, if you went back even farther before 2011, you're going to see like a 15% improvement on-time completion. And those are hard numbers to move. And so while those people who aren't familiar with those numbers and might only look at the last number, don't understand the context or the improvement that's actually been made. Now, obviously, we're going to keep working. This isn't the number where we want it to end, but there has been significant improvement, and it's been, I think, owned jointly by policies that the commission have supported, and of course, what the campuses are doing themselves every day.
When I see that number, Sean, the two things that I think of quickly are, how does that compare with other states? And then the other is what does that mean in relation to our goal of 60%? And what's the relationship between how much more do we need to close or to improve on that in order to hit our 60%?
I'll let Sean answer the first part of your question. The second part of your question is regardless of how long it takes for someone to complete, they count in that attainment goal. So it isn't just, I mean, if it takes them 8 years to complete, but eventually their attainment is a credential beyond high school, it counts.
Absolutely. And echoing that, a big reason why we care about the on time is because taking longer costs the student money. It takes longer to get them into the workforce. But at the end of the day, a win is a win, however long it takes. In terms of how we compare to the statewide or to the nationwide, again, it's pretty similar to when we look at 6 years out. Typically, most states will follow kind of, if you think about it, the same sort of curve. So if you're graduating roughly 50% of students within 4 years, you'll probably graduate right around 70% within 6 years, maybe just making up numbers, 75 within 7 years, 80% within 10 years, that sort of thing. So we're essentially right around a little bit above the nation when it comes to 4-year on time. And by the same token, we're a little bit better when we look at 4-year, 6-year completion rates. Of course, it depends on the institutions.
When you're talking about average, you're saying we're a little above the average.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. But it gets both more complicated and I become more long-winded as we drill into the details. So for example, and this is a close race, but the highest on-time completion rate in the state is at Bloomington. 71.8% of their students graduate within 4 years. And then for the extended time, again, it's a close race back and forth. Purdue main campus wins out for extended, and 87.7% of Purdue students earn a bachelor's within 6 years. So nearly everybody will, who starts at Purdue main campus or Bloomington will graduate. But it comes down to also resources, both at the institution, at the community level, in the student's own household. Again, the time and resources it takes are often big barriers, and that's one of the things that we try to solve.
Sean, could you
Sean,
remind me
this
how
is
these
Pepper.
on-time completion rates are or are not affected by programs that are more than 4 years by design, whether it's physical therapy or accounting or?
So many thanks to I think the commission members and commissioner and Ken and also and others. I think there's been a concerted effort to try to kind of tighten up some requirements to help students graduate faster. And when we kind of look at the programs, there's definitely a few programs that take a little bit longer. We try to account for that in different ways. And also when you end up looking at an institution level, those few extra semesters end up kind of becoming almost negligible. But it is something that as we start drilling down into different programs, I want to say maybe architecture was one of them. When we start looking at completion rates, it does take a little bit longer here and there.
As you might imagine, the challenge with that is if you open the door for certain programs to take longer, then all of a sudden other programs take longer. And the ones that you've tried, when you've really tried to do the 120 credit hours, and for sometimes very justifiable reasons, you want to add something else to that. But nonetheless, it means that those students are not on track to graduate in 4 years or to start to reap the benefits of their. So I think the bottom line is, as Sean was saying, the numbers are, with a few exceptions, the number of people in those programs are not enough to actually make significant changes in the numbers here.
Does
Sean,
it,
this
is there
is
any
Pepper.
difference
Can
at
you
all
remind us?
in the fact that we moved to limiting to 120 for some time now? Are we seeing that as part of the effect of this, or is that number still too small?
Oh, I definitely think it's helping. It's something where, sometimes we kind of struggle to kind of figure out what was the one thing that, really moved the needle. And then we kind of start drawn up on a whiteboard and we realized, well, the commission kind of does 100 different things at any given time. So we've never really been able to say it was this. I think we're pretty confident that trying to kind of tighten that up around 120 credits has been a
Just
big part
from,
of it.
you know, personal experience, thinking back a number of years to, there were so many programs all over the place that had an extra summer, an extra semester, you know, a couple extra courses, which threw, you know, kids into this 5-year instead of the 6-year. And now, you know, it's very, very clean. I don't think we've seen any since I've been working with academic affairs that have gone over the 120. So it would seem that maybe it does have a little difference, which is, I think, a really significant thing to talk about, at least to some people.
We also became pretty aggressive about requiring you to get the 30 hours each year. I mean,
Right, right. There are other incentives like
because the
that.
messages that were being sent, you're a full-time student when you're at, what, 20 hours? You know,
There's another factor too. Who knows? I mean, they're all in there, but now there's more money for summer school, support money. So you need that, you know, not only is it encouraged that you have to do this to hold on to scholarships, but for other kids, there's scholarship money that can carry over athletes in particular. That's quite a few people. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to just think it through. And then ask you whether what we're thinking is even accurate or not, but conjecture is always fun.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that the credit requirements made a difference. If you want to receive the maximum amount of financial aid, you have to be on taking
Right.
30 credit hours. You can get money after 24, but you don't get as much. Scholars obviously have to be doing over the course of a calendar year, not an academic year, 30 credit hours. So, you know, at the end of the day, it may be a little tough love, but it's still love because basically you're going to run out of financial aid.
And on that note, we look at a few different leading indicators. One of the big ones is something that we put in our readiness report, so I won't dwell on it too much, but it's essentially how many credits did first-year students earn? And that has been creeping up over the last few years, in particular because of requirements in financial aid, as well as our other pushes to help students to go full-time. One of the big leading indicators that we look at in this report is persistence. How many of those students came back for their second year? And about 80%, 4 out of 5, come back to their second year. We're not going to get them to graduate, especially on time, if they're not coming back. And so that's definitely something that we want to make sure that we help students get through that first year, get through that first summer, get on back, keep on track. And so for students who are pursuing a degree or certificate, again, 80% come back. Now, this is where we start to see some of those differences when we break it down by race, by gender, by socioeconomic status. When we have about 80% overall coming back, we have just under 70% of Black students coming back for their second year. So already Black students are about 10 percentage points behind the average. And so it's always a little bit of a race to try to close that difference. Hispanic and Latino students have significantly increased persistence rates over time. They're now just a hair behind the average. As our 21st century scholars, again, that has been a significant improvement and a great story to tell. Essentially, scholars are just about as likely to come back for a second year. Adult students, those are students who started at age 25 and up. Only about half of them come back for a second year. And so I think there's a real lesson there in terms of if you're going to reach an adult student, time is, as Stan Jones would say, time is the enemy. We've really got to get to them and get to them quickly, get them through. I think that's where the Workforce Ready Grant, for example, might be a huge benefit to adult students. If we can only have them for 1 year, we want to make sure that 1 year counts. I also want to draw attention to our gracious hosts here. IU South Bend has about a 50% extended time completion rate, and they've had, I think, just about the best, if improvement over the last 5 years in that extended time rate. And so again, seeing those big improvements, that takes a lot of effort, that takes a lot of dedication and hard work. So a improvement of 12 percentage points over that time, that's a significant statement. So kudos to IU South Bend. I also want to point a little bit to what Chancellor Elrond mentioned about social mobility. Here, and if it's difficult to read, about 65% of students at all our four-year institutions are what we would call higher income, meaning that their income is above the Pell Grant threshold and above the 21st Century Scholars eligibility. So about 2/3 at our four-year institutions overall. At IU South Bend, those numbers are almost flipped, where the majority of students who start out seeking a degree are either Pell eligible or 21st Century Scholars or both. And so I think this really speaks to IU South Bend's impact in the community in terms of promoting social mobility and keeping those gates open and accessible to students. We also want to point out equity gaps. In all of our reports, we try to disaggregate information by race and ethnicity and other data points. And so our next report, the one after the completion report, will be our equity report. That will be an opportunity for us to really dig deep into some of those data points, and we'll look at race and ethnicity, we'll look at gender, we'll look at rural status, socioeconomic status, and that's really our opportunity to really point to these numbers. One of the things that sometimes gets lost in the completion report, understandably, is that everyone wants to hear the top line number. And so sometimes when we point out the equity gaps, those kind of get second billing. And so we don't want to ignore them. We want to point them out here, but we'll continue to really pull out that message during our equity report. Overall, though, we continue to see some pretty big gaps at our four-year institutions. And again, as I mentioned, the Black student persistence rate is about 10 percentage points behind the average. Well, that starts to compound over time, so that by the time we get to completions, Black students are about 20 percentage points behind, and that's both on the on-time rates as well as the extended time. So again, for extended time rates, average is about 71%. Black students are closer to 50%. For on-time, average is about 50%. Black students are about 30%. Hispanic and Latino students, similarly, they're about 10 percentage points behind on both the extended time and the on-time rates. So those are things that we definitely want to continue to work on.
Hey,
For our
Sean.
two-year institutions, there's a little bit of a happier story there. Hispanic and Latino students do very well at our two-year institutions, and they're generally ahead on either the on-time or the extended time rate. It's kind of flip-flopped each year, but they tend to do average or a little bit better. Of course, there's still more work to be done, and we will go into greater depth in our equity report.
Sean, when you're looking at Blacks versus Latinos versus whites, have you categorized them by income, family income? So you're comparing more apples and apples. So if you took Pell Grant whites versus Pell Grant Latinos versus Pell Grant Blacks, what are the numbers?
Well, Al, at first I thought you were the voice of God in here. I couldn't figure out where the question was coming from. But your question is a good one, and that's something that we have been actually kind of looking at in terms of the cross tables in the upcoming equity report. And the short answer is income explains some, but not all of the gap. I think there's probably a lot to be said about just the interwoven different disadvantages and how they sometimes feed off of each other. And so while income plays a significant role, it's not the entire story.
Right, thank you.
Speaking of socioeconomic status, again, we always also want to point out, how are our scholars doing? Well, they, not surprisingly, perhaps at this point, outpaced their low-income peers. Again, that was probably decades ago, not always the story, but thanks to a lot of the wraparound services that have built up around this Scholars Program, we now see a real success story in terms of completions. There's still a ways to go in terms of catching up to their wealthier peers. And again, of course, some of these rates we look at, they're 6 years in the making. So a lot of times we'll talk about reforms, but it will take 4, 5, 6 years before we start to see some of the improvements. And so we fully expect to continue to see scholars improve over the next few years. A happy success story at Purdue's main campus, there's essentially no gap between 21st century scholars and the average student. And so that's something that, I'll leave Purdue to speak to more, but I know that they have worked very hard to work around and put some supports in place for their scholar students. And I think as we start building out the college success program, as well as other wraparound supports, we hope to see those numbers improve, not just at Purdue, but everywhere.
Sean, I don't know, I know it's in the report someplace, I'm sure we'll highlight it in the equity report, but when you look at those numbers, it's important to know that if you compare the scholars to their low-income peers who are not scholars, they're doing twice as well. I mean, the numbers are, so when you compare them to the overall population, you may look and see that they're closing the gap and they're getting close to the overall population, as he said. But compared to a low-income student who is not a scholar, the differential is almost 2 times as high, I think, in terms of performance.
It's 2 times as high in terms of who goes to college. And then even once they arrive on college, scholars outperform low-income students.
I mean, I know it's in here, but I mean, you're talking, I don't know if it's 10 or 20%, but it's a significant number in terms of improvement over that. So just to put it in context in case those numbers tell only part of the story.
Absolutely. I think one of the big lessons when we talk about educational outcomes is just the compounding effects over time. And so when you look at scholars compared to low-income non-scholars, scholars are more likely to complete high school. Then even of those who complete high school, scholars are more likely to go to college by a lot. And then even of those who go to college, scholars are more likely to have higher GPAs. They're more likely to graduate. And so those success stories, they really compound over time. And I think that's a real lesson in terms of both our work as well as realizing that it really takes a village in a lot of ways.
Hey, this is John. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
In line with what Al is saying, we have a couple schools here where they're minority students, but they're private and they really stress academics, and most of them go to college. It'd be interesting to see the graduates of some of these private schools, the minorities that graduate from the private schools. I bet you they're very close to the average.
I'd be interested in looking at that too. And we look at it a little bit by high school. And I think one of the big stories there, and you're absolutely right, in that the resources and support system that you have growing up plays a big role. Students don't just set foot on a campus one day and say, that's it, we're starting over, everyone has a blank slate. The resources that a high school has can make a difference in terms of preparing their students for the challenges of college.
If to echo something that John said, I mean, it was interesting in our markets, the parochial schools stayed open, the public schools closed. So the kids who were in the parochial schools had a much better chance of continuing to perform and be educated than those who didn't go to school at all or were hybrid or whatever you would have called it, but missed out an awful lot. And since there are a number of underrepresented students in the parochial schools, they got a benefit that others did not. So it'll be interesting to see if in fact they go on, whether it's 21st Century Scholars Program or other programs, and then go on to college, and what happens with that cohort. The real sad thing is an awful lot of people are going to be a lot further behind this year because of what happened in our school systems.
I think you're absolutely right. this is something that I'm sure everyone in our field will be studying for years and years to come and trying to make sense of it. This report is really just the tip of the iceberg, and we caught just the last few weeks of students who were impacted. I think we'll probably be talking about this for a generation in some ways.
We actually may want to cut the persistence information as it comes in now, and try to, in some way, look at the granularity of that in terms of where they're coming from, what happened, what kind of a system they were in, and whether they were in or out of classes, or because that'll tell us a story before we get 6 years out or whatever.
Absolutely. Look at some leading indicators. So part-time students, again, we focused the report on students who started full-time, but we also want to count those students. And this is where we start to get into kind of funky data collections, but we also want to count students who started part-time. In many ways, it's a little bit more difficult to suss out part-time students because they are much more broader group than full-time students. Full-time students generally are walking in saying, this is the degree I want to get. Part-time students come for a variety of reasons, a variety of goals. In general, they tend to be more likely to be low income. They are more likely to be Black. They are more likely to be adult students. Again, that's students who start over the age of 25. We don't do an on-time completion rate for part-time students because by the very nature of them starting part-time, we assume that they're going to take more than 4 or 2 years to graduate. So we only look at the extended time, that 6-year rate. Just over a quarter of students who start part-time graduate within 6 years. Again, it's a little bit difficult to try to always make sense of this because some part-time students, they might come in knowing this is going to take me 8 or 10 years. But that might be their goal. But in general, we want to at least get a sense for how many students who start taking 6 credits, 9 credits, 3 credits, how many of them are going to graduate within 6 years, and how is that number doing? And so, again, one of our leading indicators, how many of part-time students come back for a second year? Similar to adult students, and this may not be surprising because there's a lot of overlap between adult students and part-time students, but about half of part-time students come back for a second year. So again, they are not quite as engaged as full-time students for a variety of reasons, right? They likely have family obligations, likely have work obligations, likely have other reasons for why they are not full-time. But they at the end of the day are less engaged and less invested time-wise as full-time students. And it's borne out sometimes in the persistence rate. So just about 50% or a little under 50%, 44% come back for that second year. Again, this is another reason for why it's sometimes important to recognize if students are going to only be here for a year, how can we make the best of it? Or how can we maybe redirect them? Perhaps many of these students would have stayed if we had found a different opportunity for them or a different goal for them. So a lot of our efforts sometimes focus on how do we capture those students who are thinking of stopping out or are stopping out or recently stopped out, and can we redirect them to the Workforce Ready Grant, for example, or other programs?
How do you treat students who are working part-time, the company's paying for it or helping to pay for it, and they go in for some classes and then wait a few years and then go in for more classes? I mean, I've got dozens and dozens and dozens of employees in this community alone that are doing exactly that, and they're under programs that we fund. And then we have a cohort program we do with Ivy Tech, but I don't know how they would show up in these numbers. They're part-time students for sure. They're not in to get a degree right now. Eventually they want to get a degree, but they're taking courses that help them in the business.
Yeah, that's kind of the nature of the part-time students. You've got to make some judgment calls sometimes to kind of draw some dividing line here and there, but it's far from perfect. And it's why we end up kind of focusing on full-time students. We try to pull in some part-time numbers simply because it's a huge part of the population and we don't want to ignore them. But it's our broad range of, I plan to graduate within 6 years, or I'm just going to take a few courses and get around to it eventually.
And do certifications count in this?
Long-term certificates do. So no certifications, but if by virtue of pursuing a certificate or an associate's degree or bachelor's, a student becomes eligible for a certification, while we won't include it, there's probably some sort of crosswalk. So all of these numbers about improving graduation rates and getting more students across the finish line, what does it actually mean to the state and to the students? Well, again, a win's a win. So we definitely do want students to graduate, even if it takes 6 years, even if it takes 10 years, even if it takes 40 years. But the quicker they can walk across that stage, the better for everyone, the better for the economy, the better for their checkbooks, pocketbooks, and the better it is for folks. And so, and this is very rough back of the napkin calculation sort of stuff, but just the improvement of moving students from graduating within 6 years to graduating within 4 or 2 years, just for that cohort alone, it saved about $4.5 million in tuition and fees and other education expenses, simply because the longer you take to graduate, the more you're paying out of pocket in tuition and fees, in books, in other resources. And so, again, it's a really rough estimate, but we do know that this is saving students a significant amount as we shift 6-year completions onto on-time completions. And of course, it matters to the state. And so we do know from other analyses that we've done with our college ROI reports that associate students make about $250,000 more over their lifetime than they would have if they had only had a high school degree. And bachelor students earn about $700,000 to $1 million more over their lifetime. And so adding that to the economy is pretty significant when you start thinking about these numbers in terms of it's not just one student, it's not just 10 students. A lot of times when we're talking about these graduation rates, we're talking thousands of students. So it really adds up. And I think this is a big part of why we do what we do. It's not the only reason. At the end of the day, these are individuals, but as state employees, it's also important to think about the state. Beginning last year, we've also started including recommendations in our reports. And so this is the first time we've really included recommendations in our completion report. And as we were working on them and as I was typing up the PowerPoint, I realized that our recommendations, not intentionally, but ended up touching upon just about every part of the agency. And so probably I shouldn't have been surprised by that, but I think it's a happy story in terms of all of the things that we do around here. They are at the end of the day related to and completion rates and help move students through college and more quickly onto careers. And so the recommendations or the that we hope to talk about in the completion reports, we've kind of bucketed them here. But really we talk about affordability. And again, this is both keeping tuition and fees flat or low, but also our commitment to financial aid, and also helping encourage more students to file the FAFSA. Student supports. These are things ranging from internships to more connections with career services. Our College Scholar Success Program, I think, will play a big part in that going forward. Again, we want to make sure that we focus on closing these equity gaps. This will be a long-term struggle to close a lot of these. We are not going to solve all of these issues overnight, but it's something that we as a commission are committed to and will continue to focus on. And finally, a lot of the things that Dr. Sauer and the academic affairs team work on, as well as many of the things that will be familiar to you all in terms of dual credit, in terms of TSAPs and prior learning assessments. All of these things are geared towards helping students earn the credits that they need and earn them quickly and helping them get through to that diploma as quickly as they can. And so we'll probably be talking a little bit more about these recommendations as we build upon them. But I don't think it's necessarily a surprise that we touch upon so many different things here that at the end of the day, they all roll up into helping students complete college.
Sean, excellent report, and really enjoy having a data brainiac on the team, because data is so important in guiding our actions. I'm going to be really looking forward, to the in-depth report. One of the things I've mentioned over the last couple of years that I've grown very alarmed about is the widening gap between males and females that go on to higher education. And maybe even a lack of understanding of exactly what that is. I mean, how many Black males are not going on white males, Hispanic males? Where are those big gaps? And then once identified, I really believe this commission needs to move toward solving that issue as we are focused on some of the others, because I do believe that the downstream implications of that are very negative. And it's big enough that I think we need to put some serious focus and attention on that. And so I just wanted to make that comment and look forward to that report.
Absolutely. That will definitely be something we really pull apart and get into in the equity report. And as for data brainiacs, definitely I want to recognize Allison Barty and Alex Parkinson, especially Allison on this report. We kind of take turns on rotations, who's going to be kind of doing a little bit of the technical parts of this report, of these reports, and Allison has been a real key driver of the completion.
Compliments to the team.
Ditto on that. Thank you, Sean, for the preview. We look forward, of course, to the big report. I always see this as a really, really important piece of what we need to know as we move forward, and you've handled preparing it very, very well. So thank you. And now we're ready to move to the, oh, I'm sorry, Dennis. Dennis, you got to just jump in there for me. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry, not used to jumping in, especially when we have such a fine chair. Just a few follow-up thoughts. I made these comments a few years ago, and I'll take the opportunity to say it again. Thank you so very much for the report. It's always so insightful. I think there has to be a deeper, candid conversation around the performance of African Americans. And to Chris's point, more than a conversation, but more conversation around action and activity around it. As you look at the disparities and year after year, and you see some improvement, but there's an expression I use that says, "Don't help me so much that I don't improve." Don't help me so much until you see no improvement in the indicators. Because for all your care and concern, then I haven't improved, then it really does me no good. And I have seen, I've sensed, especially in this kind of era of hypersensitivity around race, and I kind of see educators and people bending over backwards and saying things that in my own experiences would not have helped me at all. And then I see people who are very caring and very compassionate who happen to be non-Black who then get silent for fear of. And so I'm reminded of a statement by the president of a school in Berea called Berea College in Kentucky. And the president was white, of course, and talking to his all-white peers. And he made the comment to his peers when he wanted to integrate the school, and he says, "My fellow brethren, I love you so much." And he says, "In fact, I love you so much that I want to tell you the truth. And I love you so much that what I have to say to you is something with which we disagree." But there was the willingness to have the love manifested in telling something that was actually polar opposite to their own positions. And I think a lot of the growth of a lot of African Americans is going to have to include those candid conversations around this is what is an external factor, and then this is what you're going to have to own. Because in my own work of 31 years now, that's what I've seen to move the indicators. And so in terms of specific recommendations, I think we have to be able to have those conversations in terms of a recommendation. I think it would be helpful for the commission, higher education leaders to come together annually and say, these are the numbers, but then specifically, this is what we have compiled and this is what we've learned that works. Here are 3 or 4 items annually that we can share that says this is what definitely works on these campuses. And for the low income, and this is what works. And then again, in the candor, we can talk about income, but let's talk about those matters of income that impact graduation and persistence. And then let's talk about those issues of income that have absolutely nothing to do with income. Again, don't help me so much that you don't improve me. There's a gentleman by the name of Cyril Turner who says a poor spirit is poorer than a poor purse. And my father always let me know that for all the racism that you talk about today, it's real, but I think your school is a little better than the school I had, since I did not get a chance to go to school because of my race. So be careful about the race issue that you bring to me, my father would say. If there are real race issues, let's vet them. In the meantime, are you going to school every day? Don't dare miss a day of school. And number 2, don't cause a problem when you get there. And number 3, if you ever cause one problem, you'll never be around to cause another problem. He was very candid about this is what excellence looks like. Excuses won't do. I think it's helpful to just say to the students, number 1, annually, what's actually working? And then share that with the students, share with the colleges and universities. And then number 2, actually communicate what's working. There's a communication strategy. We spread it across campuses. We spread it across our K through 12. These are the things that work. And then I think another idea may be we have the Kent Welding Conference. There may be an opportunity to actually assemble a conference that deals with the gaps with African Americans. With the solutions focus is when we see the data, we see now let's bring higher education leaders together and say, what are we going to do about it? And what can we do as a state so that we begin to show some significant gains and improvement over time? I just think it's high time to be able to be answers and solutions focused. I remember when there was the whole issue about the 21st century scholars, here was the minimum requirements, and we were seeing the students come in, we were seeing very little success. And then there was the recommendation, oh, well, it seems like we may need to increase the GPA from, if you all remember this, from 2.0 to a 2.5. And I remember we see some of the success now when we heighten the standards, but I also recall there being some pushback because someone dared to say, let's require a standard so that a person does not get to school and embarrass themselves by not being able to do college level work. That's one of those examples of trying to help me so much that I have no education, I have no credential, because you were quote unquote so helpful to me that you didn't challenge me enough so that I can actually step up my game to be able to meet the standards set by higher education, so I can really go out into the community and make a contribution and make a living wage. So those are my humble recommendations and thoughts.
Dennis, would you share your 215-177 with everyone?
Oh, code for excellence, absolutely. When a young person says, I'd like to be a doctor, I'd like to be a teacher, professor, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We don't hate. We love it. We'll encourage it. And we say, well, now we have qualifications. We'd like to be able to qualify or quantify, because you may not know, but this is what excellence looks like. You don't wait to become a doctor to get skilled. You have to put in the work to develop skill. So this is what we want to see in the short term to see whether or not you're committed to these long-term outcomes. 215-1770 is our code for excellence. And we say for every young person participating in our program, we expect you to study a minimum of 2 hours per night. And that's a minimum. If you're doing 3 or 4, we need you to know where the game is being played. Minimum of 2 hours per night. After you've studied, academically engaged for at least 2 hours, then we need you to pick up a book and read for at least 15 minutes. There's a lot of conversation about what I've heard and what I've seen. There's not a lot of communication about what I've read. Consequently, there's that loving conversation about a number of young people disproportionately in the African-American community being illiterate, subliterate, or illiterate. It's a challenge. We confront it, and young people grow. We need you to read, get into the habit, love it. Love it even if you hate it, you'll come to love it. In 177, the state of Indiana prescribes a 180-day school year. We need you to be in that school and in that seat at least 177 of those 180 days. We need you to be present, not just there, academically engaged, note-taking, books, whatever. We need you to be there. And then during that 180-day school year, we're expecting 0 suspensions or expulsions. 215-1770, we say when you crack the code and you begin to meet these benchmarks that the higher education community, that the professional community is expecting, and then you succeed, and then you begin to become a model for the other people that you want to bring along. So that's our code for excellence.
Terrific. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. Thanks
I
for
heard,
indulging.
I heard that some of the schools out east were thinking of dropping higher math, and because some of the minorities don't do well in math, so they're going to quit teaching it. I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about, Dennis.
Thank you all. That was just a terrific end to the conversation we started. So we always appreciate what you have to say, Dennis, and especially today. Thank you. We have several items of business with issues that we have to pass, and I think we can move through them since we had all of our discussion this morning. The first one is the reciprocity agreements. Ross gave us an overview. So the first item is the Indiana and Ohio reciprocity agreement. I will accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. The next item is the Indiana-Kentucky reciprocity agreement. I'm glad I don't have to say that word anymore. May I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, the third item is the overview of the spending plan that we talked about this morning with Alexa and Jasmine. And let's see, where am I here? I lost my place. Oh, yes, it was on, it's not in the agenda book, it was on the sheet, but we need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, this morning also, we heard from Josh about the updated language in the commission bylaws to include recent changes to Indiana's open door law. We have to prove that for our bylaws change. Oh, you got the new, that's right. I'm sorry, Josh, forgot. We did make some change. He made some changes, corrections. So we'll need to look at the new version.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. With the suggestion from Commission Member Murphy, and in looking at the language again, to make this as simple as possible so we're not referencing Indiana code, and to make this apply, excuse me, in as broad a possible way. I would suggest if you have the one pager from this morning in front of you, that we would remove everything after the word article. So it would now read, the chair of the commission in consultation with the commissioner may waive the in-person requirement of subsection 8 of this article. And this is allowable under Indiana code. Additionally, this would allow the commissioner in consultation with the chair to waive the in-person requirement for quorum in any possible circumstance that we might need that. So whether it be a disaster, whether it be a flat tire when we only have quorum by one, this would allow for that to happen.
Great.
Great. I'll move it.
I'll
I want to be
second.
sure we're getting, this is a motion to approve the document as it's changed. Is that all
Correct.
right? Because we didn't vote
Correct.
on anything yet. Okay, so the motion
As he
is
just
passed.
presented it.
And we have a second. Any further discussion? Make sure everybody's clear. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thanks, Josh. We appreciate that. Okay, we are ready for some capital projects. We have 2 capital projects for full discussion on the agenda today. And the first one item is Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, known as IUPUI. Dunham, okay, I better say this right. Dunlap Interior, Reno, first and second floors on page 37 of our agenda book. And I'd like to ask my good friend, Tom Morrison, to come forward. Hey, Tom, to give us an overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. It's a pleasure to be back with you in person again. And so it's Indiana University proposes for you capital project for the renovation of the first 2 floors of the Dunlop building on the IUPUI campus. The Dunlop building was previously the burn hospital, the burn unit of Wishart Hospital. And we IU took possession of that building about a decade ago. Building has been vacant since that time. Its infrastructure is being renovated at this time as part of a separate project connected to the Health Sciences building. And so this will renovate the first 2 floors to be clinic space for the family medicine program of IU Health in conjunction with the IU School of Medicine. This program right now exists on the hospital complex of Methodist Hospital. The building that it's in now is slated to be torn down in connection to the larger major redevelopment of that site for a new hospital, an academic health center and hospital complex mid to later in this decade. So this is one of the many moves that's about to take place. The renovation to put the family medicine clinic in the Dunlop building is $13 million for about 60,000 square feet. It will be funded completely by IU Health. And one of the questions that I know has come up previously, how many floors are in the Dunlop building and what will happen to the other floors? There are 4 floors in the building. It's 135,000 square feet in total. I would anticipate that in the future, those 3rd and 4th floors will also become clinic space, potentially of IU Health or research space. It is proximate to Riley Hospital for Children, and that's what makes the location very good. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
Alexa will present the staff recommendation.
This project is consistent with the mission of the IU School of Medicine, particularly in terms of advancing medical education and treatment. The current Family Medicine Center is undersized and unable to adequately support its residency program and patient volume. So staff recommends approval of this project.
Thanks, Alexa. May I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Any further discussion or questions?
I do have a question, and Tom, it's a simple question, I'm sure. But over years, there have been a lot of conversations around square footage and square footage costs. Is there anything distinctive or unique about this building in terms of where the square footage cost falls? Any aberration, or this in the norm?
This one, in terms of the renovation cost, is more expensive than the norm. Because it's a clinic space, there's a lot of plumbing and a lot of HVAC to it. This building was starting, it's starting from a gutted condition. And the other part of this, and this as part of a different discussion that I've had with commission members previously that was very, very helpful, is that I have loaded in a lot of the equipment and technology costs into this cost that IU Health will pay for, but is different than the normal project. So again, think hospital level space, clinic space. So therefore, it is much more intensive than your standard office or classroom space.
But as far as hospital and clinic space, it's not unusual.
It's actually on the lower end of that type of space. It's on the higher end of academic space. It's on the lower end of hospital related space.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Chris, did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Oh, your mic was on.
No, what is? I'm sorry.
Okay. I haven't been very good I kept messing people, so I didn't want to miss. Okay, any further discussions, questions? All in favor, I need a motion. We did that.
The motion was
Remember
made.
where we got. Okay, all in favor, say yes.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, our next one is the Purdue University West Lafayette Hypersonics and Applied Research Facility Project. It's on page 45 of your agenda book, and I'd like to invite Ann Hazlitt, Senior Director of Government Relations and Public Affairs of Purdue University, to present it.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Chairwoman Pitts and members of the Commission, for the opportunity to join you, albeit virtually today. We are here to seek your approval for the construction of a new hypersonics and applied research facility at Purdue University on our West Lafayette campus. Earlier this spring, Purdue announced a set of strategic next moves initiatives, and these are initiatives that are designed to advance the university's competitive advantage among the world's top teaching and research institutions. And this project, the Hypersonics and Applied Research Facility, supports two of those next moves initiatives, including one for national security and technology and the other for applied research. With these next moves initiatives, Purdue intends to lead national centers of excellence and deliver new and one-of-a-kind research and testing facilities that will be national assets and will support the critical efforts of some of our defense-related agencies like the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, USAID, as well as the federal agencies. This building would support our industry and our non-governmental organizations that are also doing work in this area. The Hypersonics project is the construction of a new facility. It is 65,000 gross square feet in size. It will house 2 wind tunnels, the Hypersonics Advanced Manufacturing Technology Center, and some of the support space necessary for those assets. Each of the wind tunnels in the building will have its own laser lab that will allow really for precise laser measuring from the tests that are being conducted in the wind tunnels. Purdue, just for that broader perspective in the hypersonic space, has one of the most comprehensive hypersonics research capabilities in the country. And the installation of these wind tunnels will make Purdue only the second university in the country to have this type of testing capability. One of the wind tunnels will also support a new technology being developed by the university. The estimated total cost of this project is $41 million, which will come from indirect cost recovery, operating funds reserves, and gift funds. We are not seeking any additional state funding for this effort. We hope to begin construction in February of next year with a scheduled completion of March in 2023 and occupancy in April of 2023. So with that overview, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ann. Alexa will ask for the recommendation from the staff.
As Ann said, this project is key to 2 of the newly announced Purdue Next Move strategic initiatives designed to advance the university's competitive advantage among the world's top teaching and research institutions. National Security and Technology Initiative, and the Purdue Applied Research Initiative. So staff recommends approval of this project.
Thank you.
Move approval.
Second.
Second, any further questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
have a capital project on the agenda for expedited action. It's listed in the agenda book on page 53. May I have a motion?
Move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. You can find information items starting on page 55 of your agenda book. Is there any old business? Is there any new business?
Madam Chairman, I'd just like to make a comment about the actions taken by the staff. It was very, very good to see a number of programs being eliminated by various colleges and universities in the state so that they can focus on those things that are most important for the education of our citizenry. And so I know we've at the commission over and over again talked about the importance of ending programs that are no longer relevant or do not have enough people in them to really support them or sustain them. And even to the point of saying and putting a time limit on those things that we might approve so that we get a chance to look at them again. I just want to laud the institutions for taking it upon themselves to undertake that kind of a review and to move forward with that.
Agreed.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Well said.
And Madam Chair,
Yes.
yes, and I have a comment. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't also be go on the record as saying, Dr. Trent, thank you very much for your service. We really appreciate you and we'll miss you. And Mayor Costas, I didn't want to speak earlier because it's sometimes difficult to express how you have the privilege of meeting one of the greatest people you'd ever want to meet in your life. And that's been my experience in having met John Costas. So I'm humbled to know you, sir. And I just want to go on the record. I could not let this meeting go without saying just how much I admire you. You're a wonderful man. Besides all the other contributions that they talked about, what a fabulous human being.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. That was lovely. I would have to say that we will greatly miss John and Trent.
Right.
Our next meeting is August the 12th at the Purdue University Northwest.
So welcome back.
Yes, and you are welcome back anytime you want. Absolutely. We do look forward to times when we will see you again. And with no other business, we are adjourned.
Okay. Bye, everybody.